Okay, so I had this dream recently, and it's about the rise of the NWO false prophet church. And it made me, every time I looked at this dream, it reminded me of another dream I had about 25 years ago. So I'm going to share that one together with this. So in this dream, it starts off, it's a very simple scene. There's just this massive collection of circus tents, bright colors, some red, some orange, maybe blue, green, all massed together, pushing upward like a mountain. And at the top of this mountain, in a little space coming out of the middle, is this kind of portly ringmaster. And he's got one stick high up in the air, and he's got his other hand out, like beckoning people, and he's saying, come one, come all, right? And it's to this worldwide prophet church. So before this scene, people are discussing the great falling away that happens. And people are saying, there are all these apostate false prophets that are always talking about a great revival that happens first. And then I say, what if their great revival is the same as what we call the great falling away in Revelation? What if those things are the same? And what if all these people who are following these apostate wolves, they're going to think that they're going into some great revival, and they're really going into the great falling away, following after men, right? And so in this scene, it shows this circus tent mountain with the ringmaster at the top. Come on, come all. And then it pans out, and I see like it's in somewhere like in the central United States, and I see like all the states panned out, and then in different places I see these little churches, and it zooms into one, and this pastor is saying, "This is the great revival we've been talking about. This is where you ought to go. Like, go and be a part of it." And then it zooms into this one woman in the audience, and she just shrugs her shoulders, and then she goes into this circus, right? And so this is what's going to happen. This is what the dream is showing. That these people who just listen to what their pastor tells them, they don't pray first, they don't check and see if there's something in the scripture that says that, they're the same ones who are believing these apostate false prophets and are following after these guys with garbage can teachings, and they're going to be deceived by this. They're seeking after God, but they don't know God. That's the problem with the foolish virgins. That's why they don't get in. That is the end of that dream, right? So it just shows, like the dream shows, like that's what's going to happen. People are going to go into this big circus. It's going to be called some great revival. And they're going to do it because everybody's saying, like, oh, that's what everybody's doing. And they're just going to go along because, well, that's what everybody's doing. Now here is the older dream. This dream had a few more scenes, but it's also basically simple. So the first scene, all these churches come together and they meet and they decide they're going to merge into one church. And when this church merges together, it's symbolized by a huge globe formed by wires, basically like latitudinal and longitudinal lines. And when they come together, all the leaders from the different denominations, they're all saying, well, different denominations and groups, they say, well, we want to maintain our status as leaders who are important and who are revered. So we need to keep our posts. So when the thing comes together, there's all this massive weight at the top. Then what happens is this wireframe globe gets pushed out into the sea, and then a storm starts to form up, and the water starts to get a little rough, and this thing is bobbing up and down in the waters, and then dark clouds form overhead. You start to hear some rumblings in the clouds. Then the wind picks up, and the waves are really getting rough and tossed. This globe, because it's so top-heavy, it naturally wants the weight to be at the bottom, and so whoop, it inverts. And as soon as it inverts and all those important people get under the water, the whole thing collapses. Now, before this happened, the dream showed this one particular man, and he was the guy who prayed all the time. And I saw that as he prayed, this gold light formed around him like a sphere. And the more he prayed, the stronger that light became. And then it showed another guy, and he prayed maybe half as much. And he had a lesser light around him, but he still had a light encompassing him, right? And then it showed other people who basically never prayed or rarely, and they either had no kind of gold around them or maybe something the size of a belt buckle, right? But commensurate with how much they prayed. So, when this thing collapses in the water, the dream zooms in and finds this guy who used to pray on a regular basis. And he's just floating in the storm. He's just floating in the water, right? It's like this golden ball of light that surrounded him became like an air pocket, an air bubble, and he's floating on top of the water. Like only like his ankles are below the top of the water, the surface, because he had so much prayer, right? The storm that comes into life basically doesn't touch him. And so he makes it, and after a few minutes, he swims and he makes it to the shore and he gets out on the shore. And then a few minutes after him, here comes the guy who prayed about half as much. And they start, calling out to people in the storm, like, here we are, we're on the land. The land is this way, come to us. And they're calling and calling to the people that are trapped in the storm. And so people begin to swim out toward them, and some people make it out. And then after a while, the inflow of people just ceases, and they realize, like, wow, no one else is going to make it. And the great majority of those people who had gone into this false prophet church, when the storm came, they drowned. That's that dream. So the warning is there's going to come a great falling away first, and there's going to be an NWO false prophet church, and when the storm comes, these people are going to be like the ones who built their house on the sand. In other words, they didn't know the voice of God. They didn't seek to obey God. They're just followers after men. But the people who knew Jesus, who is the rock, and their feet are upon the rock, they're going to be saved. And even some people who have a good prayer life, maybe they have other issues. I don't understand how they would get into this false prophet church to begin with. But when the storm comes, somehow they're still going to be protected because they have that prayer life. And this is something I've heard before. People say, there are still some good people inside all these false churches. Those are the two dreams. There's we know from the scripture, there's a New World Order false prophet church on the horizon. It's going to be like a circus. There are going to be a lot of these false pastors. They're going to be saying, this is the great revival we talked about. But really, the scripture says that first there must come a great falling away. This is the man from Modesto reminding you, as always, to pray or be defeated.